Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, welcome back, Films and Stuff. This is episode 99.
That's right. Getting very close to our big 100.
Getting close to the century mark. Shall we just talk about what we've been watching recently? Because last week, we challenged each other to check out Bridgerton and see what all the hubbub is about, yeah?
On last week's episode of Streamer Skip, we talked about Bridgerton. We talked about, you mentioned you had watched Untold. You got me. I have to say, the reason I love Streamer Skip is because if it weren't for you, I don't think I would have watched Pachinko. I don't think I would have been interested in Untold. And I watched them both, and I'm glad that I did. I really am.
So let's just set the scene. What we're talking about is there's a number of kind of sports-related documentaries, like 90 minutes each on Netflix, and they're all generally titled like Untold as a series. And this one is about the Manti Te'o catfishing incident that happened about 10 years ago, huh?
That's right.
And if you're not familiar with the summary of it, a very prominent American football player disclosed to the media that his girlfriend had passed away from leukemia. And then it came to light that, in fact, not only had he never actually met this girlfriend in person or seen her live in person, the girlfriend herself never even existed. And he was subject to just, I guess, worldwide, what would you say? Ridicule. Harassment,
yeah, for sure.
Humiliation. He became a meme when probably meme wasn't even a word yet. And this documentary dove a little bit deeper and explained that most of that is correct. He had never met his alleged girlfriend, and the alleged girlfriend never actually did exist, but it explained that he was kind of the victim of an extraordinarily elaborate online catfishing scenario, I guess.
Yeah.
Where the person who was deceiving him went through just unimaginable hoops to kind of convince him that who he thought was his girlfriend was in fact a real legitimate person. And he sincerely believed that they did have a relationship, even though it was a long distance, never in person relationship.
Yeah. And it opened up the drama in terms of everyone then started questioning whether Manti Te'o was potentially homosexual. Was he in on the con? All of these kinds of questions opened up. And now, of course, society as a whole has gotten very, let's say, liberal and open about being homosexual or not. However, in the professional sports world, and certainly at least 10 years ago, that's still a big, I don't want to say no, but that's still a big issue, right? People would not want to.
It was pretty taboo, especially in American football, which is
unlike a very masculine, potentially,
team sport.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stigma around that, good or bad. We're not going to comment about that. We're just telling you as it is. Like, it's still rare to see professional sports stars, and this is not just an American problem. I think this is the reality for professional sports athletes anywhere, to be a homosexual one way or another. So
what'd you think of the documentary? I mean, documentaries are sometimes really difficult to get the right tone, to get kind of the correct level of emotion. I thought this one hit it on the head. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think documentary-wise, it was really good. It was relatively fair and balanced everywhere. And it wasn't, the way they presented it, which was nice, wasn't Manti Te'o versus his, not accuser. What's the problem? What's the word? Not victim.
He was the victim. Deceptor.
Yeah.
Decepticon. Yeah.
what do you call it in
Catfisher?
court? Defendant versus
Plaintiff?
Plaintiff?
Witness?
No, the accuser, whatever. I don't remember. Whatever the correct word is, right?
Yeah. The fraudster.
The fraudster. Let's call it the fraudster, right? Let's call this woman the fraudster.
The ne'er-do-well. The
ne'er-do-well. Because, sometimes especially in dramatizations, but in some documentaries, it's hard for the person making the documentary to present a very neutral stance.
Yeah.
I think this did a very good job of presenting the neutral stance and then letting the viewer decide, do you side with one or the other? Do you not side with anything? Do you just look at it as it is? I mean, I have my opinions as to how I felt after I watched this show.
I mean, Manti definitely, I have to say, for Manti, this documentary, I think, rehabilitates his reputation dramatically.
It's a little bit of a redemption arc for him.
It is redemption. I think that it's very difficult, maybe even impossible, unless you just have a black frozen heart, to not feel some sympathy for this guy. You may feel that maybe he kind of made some mistakes, but certainly there's a lot of sympathy for him, and he absolutely comes off as the victim and someone whose professional life was pretty much ruined, because of this incident.
Exactly.
Yeah, decimated.
Exactly. And I'm surprised or maybe I missed it, but there was no attempt for him to go to court or anything like that, was there?
No, not that I'm aware of.
He didn't threaten to go after her in court, nothing like that. Yeah, I mean, a little surprising only because, I mean, he had what would have been a very, in my opinion, successful professional career taken away from him by this incident. And, of course, that's speculative. We don't know how he would have fared without this drama hanging over his head, because it unfortunately was. But by all rights and indications, it seemed like he was going to be one of the stars of the National Football League.
Yeah. I think that this was a great documentary, but the one thing that I think took this from being interesting to over the top good was the fact that somehow, and I really don't know how, the person who was the catfisher, right? The ne'er-do-well, agreed to be interviewed at length. And I have to say, usually when you see a documentary like this, the person who did the bad thing is nowhere to be found.
That's right.
And you rely on a lot of third-hand accounts of who this person is or maybe why they did it and all those justifications. I mean, this person is, let's just say what they did was evil without question. Absolutely terrible, terrible, terrible thing. The only redeeming thing I can say about this person is at least they had the guts to get on camera and be remorseful and apologetic and own up to it and say, hey, what I did was wrong. I mean, they try to kind of justify why they did it, which maybe someone could have some sympathy towards, but overall the person owned up to it. And I thought that was what made this really good, was that they kind of admitted I did this and I was wrong to do it. I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It was very powerful. I didn't think it was anything great. I didn't like that, but fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's the best part of the documentary, but I think it was important that you actually had the person who did the bad stuff show up on camera and own up to it, and they didn't say no, that wasn't me, or no, this was all a big mistake. They owned up to it, and it wouldn't have been as good if the other person would have been there, or if they would have fought back and said, that's not how it happened. It wasn't totally my fault. This person was at fault as well. The fact that they just kind of owned up to it, I thought is what made, redemption complete, was that there was no question whatsoever that he was the victim of this, that it was not his fault. and that there was someone else out there, who owned up to it.
100%. 100%. I'm with you on that.
All right.
So anyway, Untold, I watched it. I liked it. I think I liked it slightly less than you, but I do agree it's one of the better sports documentaries.
Yep.
And to be fair, probably one of the better documentaries, period, that I've seen in a long time.
Yep.
It's a mooch from me.
Yeah.
But it's a really, if you don't have anything to watch, I recommend it.
Yeah. I think it's hard for me to say any documentary is a must subscribe. I don't think you need Netflix only because of this. But so I would say it's a mooch as well. But if you are a sports fan and you do remember this about 10 years ago, it's a must watch if you are a sports fan and this is something that you followed in the past.
Agreed. So let's quickly then transition from real world to very not real world. When we talk about Bridgerton, something we jokingly challenged ourselves to watch last week. And so I don't know about you, Ethan, but I'm kind of glad we did it.
I mean, to put Bridgerton into context, I mean, this was a 2020. I mean, there's 2 seasons now, right?
Yeah.
And I think a few things. One, it probably came out in a time when there was not a lot of content and a lot of people were home, either quarantining or, we're in a pandemic-y world, right? And this is something that probably came out on Netflix at exactly the right time. It is, by all accounts, extraordinarily well regarded, right? I mean, it's got a Primetime Emmy Award. It had 11 nominations. It's got a BAFTA Award, an AFI Award, a Black Reel Award, British Film Designers Guild Award, Casting Society of America, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah, something called FIPRESCI. Don't even know what that means. It's got everything, right? And the point is, by all accounts, it has been critically acclaimed. And from an audience perspective, it was extraordinarily popular. So Pete and I were basically said to ourselves, what are we missing? This doesn't seem to appeal to us at all. What is all the hullabaloo about? Let's at least take a watch and see if this is something that's just a bunch of wayward teens who are getting their, I don't know, medieval fix on, or if there's really something to the story. And what do you think, Pete?
So, okay, it's a period piece, something that we have not, we've not hidden the fact that it's not our genre. I don't like period pieces like this generally. Yeah. I will say that by the end of watching the 3rd episode, I couldn't help but feel like I was getting hooked on this show.
Yeah, it's
like a guilty pleasure for me. I don't know how much I would openly admit this to the world, so let me do it on a very public podcast instead.
Yeah. Don't do it in public. Just do it here.
I'm quite open to the idea of continuing to watch this show. It is a strong mooch from me.
I would say the same, but the only difference is that, or maybe I'm saying the same thing as you. I'm also not a fan of what this is called is a historical romance television series based on a collection of novels. What you and I call a period piece, right? Because it's got all the fluffy dresses and the parasols and all this other stuff. It's not our style at all. I also have to say, I'm kind of into the characters and the storyline, but if I didn't go a week watching it, it wouldn't even cross my mind. But
totally.
If I just plopped down on the sofa and I was like, I need something to watch, and Bridgerton came up, I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch that. I want to see what happened to so-and-so, right? And I'd be definitely into it for 1 hour, but I could turn it off and I wouldn't be like, oh man, I've got to stay up and watch just one more. What's going to happen to Penelope? What's going to happen to Prudence? What's going to happen to Lord Anthony? Blah, 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 right?
Yeah. I got to say, so for those who haven't seen it, It's set in a very, very glamorized version of England.
Very sunny,
if
glamorized.
If you've watched Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes series, take that and do the exact opposite to London. It's super sunny. It's super green. It's super clean.
Yeah.
It is it looks like a
organized
painting made in real life. It's crazy how nice it looks.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that London was exactly like this or that London was like Guy Ritchie's version, but the reality is it was probably closer to Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes London than it was to Bridgerton's London.
Can I just ask, what year do you think this is? Like 1700? 1800?
Oh, no, I think this would be like late 1800s.
So let's say 1880?
Late 1800s, early 1900s.
Let's say it's the year 1900, right?
Yeah.
1900.
Like it's the Victorian era, right?
I mean, tell me what they had back then. Did they have like toothpaste? For soap, did they just have lye? They didn't have running water. They didn't have flushable toilets in London in 1900, did they?
No idea. Again, not my bag, so I don't know.
I expect better of you. Sitting in the heart of London, I absolutely expect better of you to know the history of your own neighborhood.
I'll tell you. Let me give you an example. The building I live in was built in probably the Bridgerton times.
Yeah.
It was built in 1895.
Yeah.
So I can tell you right now that if I didn't have running water and indoor plumbing right now, summertime would be a place to avoid at all cost, even in my flat, because it gets hot. Buildings are designed to trap heat in the UK. So it gets hot. There is no air conditioning. Yeah. You get sweaty. You get smelly.
Yeah.
And that's me wearing one layer of clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about
you're
people
just wearing
who are wearing
you're just
like
wearing
35 layers.
Yeah, you're just wearing a t-shirt. You're not wearing a corset and a frilly dress and a wig and all this other like
and a waistcoat and 3 inches of makeup on my face.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the men here too, by the way.
Yeah.
This isn't just a woman thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in terms of the clothing.
Yeah.
So it's I get it. I totally understand what you're saying. So it's a hyper glamorized or a hyper fictionalized version of London that way. And of course they drop certain names that make you think, oh my God, that's what Grosvenor Square looked like back in the day. Of course it didn't. There's no way.
That's one thing that always gets me. I think that's the one thing that I get crazy fixated on, which is, like, did they have running water? What was the toilet situation like? Did they even have shampoo? Or did they just have like lye and like bar soap? And then I get into the names. Prudence Featherington, Lady Danbury, like all these Simon Bassett, Duke of Hastings,
What I will say is Bridgerton does something which I think is going to become more and more of the norm. And we see the same thing happen in the Rings of Power. They take the issue of race and 150% ignore it. So you have a Duke of Hastings who's black. Yeah. You have landed gentry in the UK who are black, or who are Indian, or who are people of color. And they totally ignore that, which is obviously not something that would have happened back in the day. I mean, that is clearly 100% wrong. But they're just saying, hey, listen, this is glamorized. It's a fiction. We're not even going to address it. We hired this guy not because he's black or because she's black or because he's Indian or because she's Pakistani, whatever. That's not why we hired them. This is not a political statement one way or another. We hired these people because they're excellent actors. And I have to say, it's refreshing because whether you're into that historical fiction or not, the one thing you cannot disagree about is that everyone is doing a phenomenal job of acting. You don't look at Regé Jean Paul or whatever his name is, the guy in The Gray Man, and think, how is it possible that he's the Duke of Hastings? You think of him as like, wow, he's an incredibly attractive young man.
Even Queen Charlotte is black.
And Queen Charlotte is black. And you see that they're doing a really good job.
Yep.
You don't look at them. You ignore their race entirely and you just focus on the characters and the show. And because the show also ignores that, you're just like, oh, that's fantastic.
Yep.
It's wonderful. It's really good. And I can totally see the appeal for young men and young women, especially for this show, because everyone, men and women alike, are extremely elegant, are extremely attractive. And, you know, it's really a simplistic premise, right? It's about a couple of really wealthy families and about one family trying to marry off their daughters, one family trying to marry off their sons, and you get to see the trials and tribulations of that. It's really nice. I think it's that way. I think I fully see the appeal to that.
Let me make two observations, if you don't mind. My first observation is that I think one of the reasons Bridgerton is so good is that they have kind of like this narrator, right? They call her Lady Whistledown, right? Who's kind of like this anonymous gossip columnist. And I think that way of narration, I thought was really, really good. I thought that was just a very smart way to kind of give
you exposition.
Give you exposition on the show. The other observation I have, and this is a little bit of a criticism as to why I generally don't like these types of period pieces, is that the show is very irrelevant. And I mean that in the sense that it's absolutely entertaining. I cannot say that I'm not entertained, but at the end of watching 2 episodes, all I've done is kind of distracted my mind for 2 hours. I haven't learned anything. I haven't become more creative. I haven't challenged myself. You know, I don't even, and that's kind of, I feel a little bit guilty when I get done watching the show because I feel like time is really valuable. And I'd prefer to watch sci-fi or even something like a little bit more crazy that either makes me laugh and makes me think of something funny, or it's something more like sci-fi or a scenario that's like a little bit more unique that I feel like gives me like some inspiration or creativity or something. And my problem with a show like this and why I generally don't like them, not because the story's not good. The story's very good, but it's not really actually adding anything to like me as a person when I'm done with it. It's just kind of like eaten 2 hours of time and I've, it's like scrolling through your Instagram account or something. You're definitely entertained, but when you're done, you're not necessarily better off for watching it. And that's why I generally try to avoid shows like this. And I enjoy more sci-fi because I feel like sci-fi makes me more creative and it gives me more ideas and challenges me and it gives me something I never even thought about before.
No, I'm with you. I 100% with you.
So
it's like the equivalent of like the fast food of TV shows.
Yeah. Again, it is exceptionally well. Everything about it is very good. I mean, and every
set
award,
design, excellent. Clothing
every award,
design,
dialogue,
excellent.
everything. I mean, it's well acted. There's not a single bad thing about it. It's just in terms of the genre or the theme, it's not really my style. Even though I have to say, I was following it, and I have the people I wanted to see together and the people I didn't want to see to get together and the people I liked and the people I didn't like. So anyway, that's Bridgerton. To answer the question, which I'm posing, should you watch it? You will not be disappointed if you do watch it. But I also think it's fair to say that you will not be missing out on life. If you don't see it, you will certainly survive without watching the show. Fair assessment, Pete?
That's exactly right. I think it's a strong mooch in this regard. It's something that, I think your scenario is exactly right. If I sat down on the sofa, I turned on Netflix, and the first thing I saw on there was Bridgerton, and I didn't really have anything I definitely wanted to see, I would not say no to watching the 3rd or 4th or 5th episode and continuing. But then at the end of the night, I'd just be like, okay, I'm going to bed. I don't need to see the rest of it. I'll see it in a month or 2 months whenever I'm in the same position.
Do you think this is let's call For All Mankind a buddy show? You know, you and I watch it. So when we haven't seen each other for a long time, like we've got something to talk about. We're two dudes, like it gives us like some commonality, right? Yep. Do you think that Bridgerton is like a buddy show for ladies?
For ladies, and I think for people who just like this kind of genre, and when I say genre, I don't necessarily just mean period pieces. I also mean in terms of context, it's effectively a romance show, right? Where you're talking about families trying to marry off their children and, you know, all the drama that comes with that. Yeah. So, I think so. I think it would be really interesting. Like, you know, it's something that people can gossip about without it really being gossip.
Yeah. I mean, I guess kind of the scenarios I envision, you know, it's like, you know, like my sisters or like anyone's sisters, you know, like it seems like a show that you should be watching with a friend or with a sister. I mean, I guess it could be two brothers, but it's probably gonna be sisters, you know, so that they've got like something in common to kind of like talk or gossip about. I can see it being a very good bridge, you know, just like for dudes, you know, like, for dudes, it's kind of like, you know, you go on like a double date and the dudes don't know each other, even though the girls are best friends. What are the guys supposed to talk about at dinner? They talk about sports, right? Sports,
generally speaking, you know, sports,
they're not talking about work. They're not talking about their diet or their personal trainer or anything. You know, they generally talk about sports. That's a commonality. And I feel like Bridgerton is that thing that you should be watching with your bestie or you should be watching with your sister. Maybe not physically, but like kind of together so that you've got that thing to talk about, you know?
Yeah. I mean, for example, this is 100% a show I can imagine my sister and my mom talking about.
Yeah.
I can totally see the two of them having watched it on their iPad separately.
Yes.
And then like over dinner or over, you know, tea or snacks or something like that. They're just like, I can't believe that Featherington did this. I can't believe that the Duke did that. My God, she punched him in the face. That's unbelievable. I can 100% see that happening.
I bet. And I'd love it over high tea. I love that they'd be talking about it over high tea.
Yeah. So yes,
London society, talking about London society. Maybe your mom is Lady Whistledown.
Right. Yeah, if only.
But you know, Pete, you and I made the joke before, which is it's almost comedic, the names that they've come up with in these.
Yeah, it's so classically over the top British high class.
Like, what are your neighbors? I bet your neighbor what's your neighbor's name? James Martin, right? Like all these typical, like, no one's got a name like Whistledown, right?
Oh, yeah, not anymore.
Featherington.
Or Genevieve Delacroix.
Yeah.
Or Lord Brimsley.
Right? There's no James Martin. What's like a very traditional, like, British name, right? Like
Matthews.
Yes.
Classic. I know what you mean.
The names just get like
over the top.
Yeah. There's got to be, if it hasn't been invented already, there has to be some type of like name generator where you.
Oh no, it's already there. You know what's hilarious is I was just hitting the link on my computer for it now.
Tell me what it is. Tell me what my Bridgerton.
Let's give you an Edwardian name, okay? Would you like to be Lord Gordon Chegwidden? Or Sir Emmanuel Brakefield?
Oh, yes. I want to be Sir Emmanuel Brakefield.
Or how about Lord Geoffrey Bodden?
I prefer a name that's like a noun. I want like Whistledown, Brakefield. Yeah.
Lord Magnus Bucket.
Yes. Lord Magnus Bucket.
I know exactly what you mean. You're right. It's like they've gone to like a fantasy name generator and said, all right, here's the genre I want. Throw me 10 names that I can use in my script.
And now our next episode, when we talk about Rings of Power, we're going to go the opposite way and talk about all these crazy names of people, places, and things that, man, this guy's got quite an imagination, or he was doing like some super strong acid when he was writing these books, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means, everyone, we are wrapping up this episode. And we are moving on. Join us for our next episode. We're taking a deep dive into Rings of Power, House of Dragon, Wheel of Time, everything Middle Earth, medieval, and Amazon versus HBO.
It's getting really spicy and really petty, so I'm looking forward to it.
Spicy and petty, that's what we're here for. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. This episode 99 of Films and Stuff. Send us your feedback.
Let us know aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com or tweet at us at FNS Podcast. Let us know what you think of Bridgerton, or why don't you guys tell us what your fantasy Edwardian or Victorian names would be? Leave a comment with your name.
Keep it clean.
Fair enough.
If you give us your Edwardian name, I think Pete's sitting on a bunch of Films and Stuff hoodies.
We will reach out to you and send you over one.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Pete.
Thanks, guys.
Catch you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.